herself since she was a widow, right? So it could, I mean, it could be like 78-year-old lady. I have to say though, like since you've been talking about this, I have like crazy goosebumps. Like
grab an animal, keep an animal on your lap.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's your comfort cat? Where's your comfort companion there? Your support dog. Yeah. And all of a sudden, all the cats and dogs are like, I don't want no part of this shit. I'm out of here. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. So it gets pretty cooler. So I will tell you right now, that is the only death I did find for your house. Okay.
Okay.
But there's a lot of weird stuff about your house, but cool stuff. So I'll keep going. So now the next owner of the property was her son, James Pollock Jr. Okay, and then he owned 320. He owned it from about 1930 to 1941. Okay, and it stated that his occupation was Toronto Trust. And then when I looked into it further, at Toronto Trust, basically he was like a whatchamacallit, an elevator operator. So I thought Toronto Trust was a bank back in the day, but I think it might have been some kind of a factory of sorts or something for him to be an elevator operator or a grain operator maybe. I'm not too sure. The only incident that happened while James owned the house was in September of 1938. And this is kind of funny because you had mentioned a comment about that earlier, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to tell her. That's a weird thing. So while he was at home, he did stop an attempted break-in of the house, or as the newspaper called it, housebreakers. Okay. His dog, and they had animals in the house, so was credited for alerting of the attempted robbery. There you go. And his barking is credited for scaring them away. And then James found a smashed basement window where they were going to enter by, but once the dog scared them away, he saw the car speed off. So that's interesting because you said the dogs keeping away burglars. So
yeah,
isn't that cool? Yeah. That's cool. So and maybe their dogs are companion dogs with your dogs, right? So it's all kumbaya. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Now the odd thing though, here in June or July of 1940, right? So this would be like a good 10 years after Minnie passed away. There was a newspaper articles offering 320, the house at 320 for rent. So he had it rented out for a while, and then he went to go live, I think, in a hotel called Grange Hotel or something to that effect. I did also find that he, at one point, went to go live with his wife, Catherine, at 758 Victor Street. But in her obituary, nothing is listed as any other family, like no children. So Minnie's son didn't have any children. So, just kind of died out with him, I guess. So I was unable to, again, locate even an obituary for James, like her son. But, because usually then that would indicate if there were siblings, you know what I'm saying? So, but by all indications, he had no spouse when he died, no children, and which would probably be a high chance, and nobody left to submit an obituary for him. So that's kind of sad, So only other mention of James as a car accident he was in 1959 that stated he was 65. So then he would have been born in 1904. So this all kind of fits together. Where he was seriously injured, he had rear-ended a parked car downtown on Kennedy Street, and he had a collapsed lung and some broken ribs. And that was just 3 years after his wife passed. So maybe he was drunk, I'm making assumptions, nothing left to live for, blah, blah, blah. Anyway. Right. Okay, so that ends the saga of the first family, second owner, the Pollocks. Okay.
Although it's interesting because that spare bedroom that I'm talking about that felt ominous was actuly, we were told when we bought the house, it was for renters. Because it had weird.
I have something more for you. Oh my God.
Plugins.
This is so awesome.
Yeah, that's because that's for renters, and so they could have a stove up there and stuff.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh, that's weird.
I just got chills. I just got chills.
I do.
This makes so much sense now. Okay, so it's not Minnie. I know who the other person is that's come back then. Okay? Oh my God, I'm so excited. This is crazy man. Okay, so now the third owner, was a couple by the name of Bernice and Byron Schramm. Okay, so she was listed as a seamstress, and Brian was a salesman with a company called Weiler and Williams. Didn't really specify what they did or whatever. So, and it didn't say where Bernice worked as a seamstress, but possibly she worked from home, as they had 4 children in total, right? So, you got a stay-at-home mom working as a seamstress, right? Would seem the best way to earn money for the family, especially that big, huge home to heat in that day. You know what I'm saying, right? They had owned the home from 1942 to 1947. And from there, they actually moved around the corner to 219. Isn't that funny?
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I guess I'll block out. Sorry about that. Anyway, so the only thing that happened while the Shrams lived at 320 was a newspaper announcement that their son, Gunner William F. Schramm, he had joined the military. And it's funny how how I said, it's so salacious. The newspapers back in those days, they had to print everything, right? They actually printed that he joined the military, and they reported that the Shrams received notice that their son had arrived overseas.
Yeah.
Just the fact that he physically touched down on the other coast, right? Before he started the war. But he did survive the war. But there was a newspaper article from 1973 of this William F. Schramm's, by this point they've already moved, right? They moved away, right? But I like to follow up these things. So he actually passed away in 1973, and his obituary stated that he died suddenly at Netley Lake. I thought I was going to say Netley Creek, but Netley Lake, Manitoba. Yeah. But it's still specifically in his obituary called out his address, his residence in Winnipeg at number 219. And then it said he was survived by 1 brother and 2 sisters. So now whether he inherited that house, I don't know. But obviously, a man of that age sticking at home with the parents, I'm sure they'd passed on already, but living with them. So, if there was any kind of a military feel in your house and that was a childhood home, you never know. And that's why I threw that in there, right? Because spirits gravitate to memories and places of comfort and, Now, this is where it gets good. Are you buckled in? Drum roll. Okay, so now the 4th owner that I have was from 1948 to 1965, or potentially later. And this is why I thought it would have been about 16 years before you actually took the house. Either give or take, right? So the final year date is unknown. Those owners, the 4th owners, were Paul and Eleanor Kostuk. And he is listed as a sub-foreman at Canadian Packers and later on as a chef at Canadian Packers. I didn't have any description for her, though. But prior to purchasing their home in 1944, they lived at 629 Furby Street, and that's where I found that they had 1 daughter born in 1944. So they only had 1 child in that big, huge home, right? So when you have a big, huge home with all that space, what do? You rent it out, right? Right. Okay. So in 1955, Paul Kostak was the president of the Northern Twisters Club. And in 1974, he was a square dance caller. I thought I would mention that just in case all of a sudden you hear...
Oh my goodness.
Funny, right? Yeah.
So, or stomping on the floor.
Stomping, in case you hear a caller calling the... whatever I don't know anything about square dancing. I just know the what is it, the butterfly when you're whipping your relatives around the floor when you're doing the whatchamacallit, right? Anyway.
Yeah. Ukrainian social.
The Ukrainian social, that's right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So aside from that, 2 strange things to note about these owners, the Kostaks. From a newspaper article in 1941, Paul's actual name was Paul Zavarucha. So there's no record of a surname or info on file for the last name of Zavarucha. He legally applied to put notice in the paper of his name change to Paul Kostuk, taking his wife's surname legally, as she is listed as signing consent, Eleanor Kostuk. However, her maiden name was Jenkinson. That's just weird.
What are they doing? Are they running away from somebody or what?
I don't know. Like that. And I mean, this predates when they purchased the house in 48, but it's just odd. It was odd.
Yeah.
Maybe mafia ties or something. Well, not just that. It's almost like she either changed her name before him, or she was married once before, but why would the guy take some other guy's name, right?
Like, right, kind of shady.
Kind of shady. So I thought in case you got a fortune buried under the basement there or something. Or
right.
bones. Or
You should check the wall.
Anyway, we'll bring the Ouija board right over. Just kidding. We have nothing to do with Ouija boards. Nothing. So that was one strange thing. Okay, and this is like the drum roll piece right here.
Okay.
In February 5th, 1960, Minnie McKelvey, who lived at the residence of 320, passed away at the age of 66. She died at Concordia Hospital, but the obituary was very small, and it only listed her 2 brothers of the same last name and 3 sisters surviving. Since there was, such a large... I wrote this in the notes. This is freaking me out. Since the house is so large, it is possible the Costucks had a renter, or if she was an elderly spinster relative. There you go.
Yeah. I'm getting crazy goosebumps
another Minnie.
That's her.
Describe this.
That's her. She came back. It's not the first Minnie. It's the second Minnie. And they both have the name Minnie.
Right.
That is weird, though.
Isn't that weird?
That is so weird.
So, to finish this...
And it was that room. It was the renter's room.
I bet you it was.
That this was happening.
Bet you, yeah.
Yeah.
And just to finish this off, just because full circle type dealy. So, Eleanor Ellie Costuck, she passed away July 24th, 1989 at the Victoria Hospital at the age of 78 from cancer. And Paul outlived her, so he could call his square dancing, I don't know, whatever. He outlived her. He passed away August 2nd, 1996. No reason other than old age. He was 85 years old. And his residence at that time, though, of passing was the Concordia Personal Care Home. And like I said, they had one daughter that was mentioned in the obituary, and her husband, Toplins, but there's no mention of any grandchildren at all. So there you go. That's your house.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool, and it makes so much sense.
Doesn't it?
It's so creepy, but we were told when we bought it, that was the renter's room. And at that time, we had made it the spare bedroom, and that was when all these things were happening.
I'm freaking you out, freaking me out, freaking you out, freaking me out. I shit you not.
I'm
freaking out here.
Gone back to see Minnie.
And it was funny too, because when I did the research, I got the feeling, because like I said, going past your house every day for all my life here, I always had the feeling some old lady coming out and chasing away the kids. I just felt that, right?
Yeah.
But not the renter girl, but just I felt like the matriarch of the house, proper
the
house.
Mama Minnie.
Yeah. Got to keep, like her outside sweeping or something, I had that vibe for years.
Yeah.
And then to the point where I would look at your house, even before you lived there, I would look at it, looking to see something, waiting to see something look back at me, right? Don't call me nutty, but I've seen and felt a few things. Call me nutty. I don't care. But as soon as I did the research on this and everything, and, right, you never told us what it was or what you felt or anything. You just said something in my house, right? So I had nothing to go on, nothing to build on. So I start doing my research. I'm compiling my information. I'm doing all what I do. And then I come across this renter girl, and she just fits so weird. She fits so weird into everything, because she had no connection, had no husband, no kids, a small little bit, and she was 66, which is by far kind of young. Maybe she had maybe she had mental illness.
And that is more the person that I saw, that kind of not super old, not young, just around the 50s, 60s. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then at the same time, I did look up her name to see where she'd lived prior, but she had a couple of sketchy addresses like Sherbrooke, and so maybe she was doing rooming houses somewhere else first, right? And maybe she just really loved this address, and in 59, 60, she felt like that was her home, and that's where she came back, maybe,
Yeah.
And she would be pissed that somebody was in her place if she was renting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She want people out.
Yeah, and they had no occupation for her, so maybe she was just a product of society. She just maybe mental health issues, I'm thinking. I'm not calling her crazy by any means, but it's just odd. 66, and she had all that family, but she didn't stay with family, right? 2 brothers and 3 sisters, and she wouldn't stay with them. And she has to go stay in a boarding home in this house.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it by what you researched and what I felt and what I experienced, it just kind of ties it all together and just makes perfect sense. Right. And just the fact that absolutely I knew it was a woman, absolutely I kind of knew, like, around the age, it just, and the room even that she, like, stayed in, just kind of, like, it feels so good when it all just kind of comes together and makes sense.
Right, for sure.
And I feel like that's what just happened.
Yeah, you got like a full story, right? Like you know, because this is your home and you're sharing your home with somebody else. You want to know who you're sharing it with, like no matter if they're dead or alive, right? Like really.
Yeah, and even with Minnie dying at 3:20,